Happy you're here. My name is Dana Kuhnlein. I'm the program director for Reimagine Appalachia. We are about to have a Minty poll just as everybody's getting settled in. And so we're going to drop that link in the chat and walk you through how to use that in just a minute. Just a few nuts and bolts as we're getting started. You can see the name of the event. If it's not what you thought you were here for, you've gotten on the wrong plane and you may need to disembark. But otherwise, we're so excited to be joined here with some partners who are leaders from the Green Bank for Rural America. I'm going to hand it to Emma in just a minute and let Emma get into more details about that. But as your flight attendant for the day, a few nuts and bolts. So this event is being recorded. Anybody who registered for the event, which should include you if you managed to make it here, will be sent an email after the event with the PowerPoints that were shared, as well as a link to the recording for follow-up. And if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, we always support networking. We always want to know who's here. And so we're really, really excited to have you all here today. So feel free to share your name, your organization, where you work generally. We'd love to see that. Love to see that in the chat. We'll have time for audience Q&A, and so please hold your questions till the end. But if you do have questions as we're going along, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and folks may be able to answer them for you in the chat as well. For folks who are hard of hearing or just visual learners, you are able to enable closed captioning, and to do that, we'll put the instructions in the chat, but you should see a little option that either says captions or little 3 dots with the more button, and you can follow the trail there to get the closed captions turned on for you. I think that is all the kind of FYI, just as we're getting started. I want to hear about who you are and where you're from. I already asked y'all to introduce yourselves, which some folks are doing a fantastic job of that. Let me bump up that Minty poll link in the chat for folks. And so if you could just you follow that link and you'll get the option to have where you're from show up on the screen. So I'll go ahead and there we go. Pennsylvania was the fastest at the draw. So sorry to everybody else. And I'll just drop that again. I know folks are kind of rolling in as we're getting started. That's great. Do you like my color scheme? That's new. This is new. That's a new color scheme for us. Yeah, you feeling it? The pink there. It's a little wild card. All right. We're having a good time today. They can take our funding, but they can't take our sense of humor, right? Okay. I'm going to drop that link right in the chat there, right there one more time for you all. And I'm going to speed through this because I am really just so excited to hear from our speakers. I'm loving all these introductions that are coming in the chat. And just one more question of what kind of group do you represent? And so I want to say, I know that all of you are many types of groups. And so I actually have this set up so you can, in theory, answer all 9 if they all apply to you. So don't feel hampered. I understand we're all wearing many hats in our lives and in our rooms. So there's some options for you. I may have guessed wrong as to what you would sort of most resonate with. So I apologize. But thanks to folks who are doing their best to kind of figure out where they fit in these 9 little boxes. So oh, Isabel, I'm so sorry to hear that. It's a hard time. I'm like I said, I'm trying to keep it light, but I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a hard time and it's a sad time. But the good news is that the people we're working with are the best, and we're so lucky. And the people and the groups and the power that remains in our region. And so I feel both sad every day in my job and also incredibly lucky. So I just to name those, we're complicated people and we can feel 2 things at the same time. So and maybe with that, I will, speaking of wonderful people that we're so blessed to work with, hand it to Emma B to talk a little bit more about what we're doing here today. And I'll give this just another second to matriculate, and I'll turn it off.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dana. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Emma Byrne, and I serve as Director of Impact at the West Virginia Community Development Hub. Proud West Virginian. I grew up in the Eastern Panhandle, and now I'm in Fayetteville in the New River Gorge region. Um, when Back in January, when Dana and the Reimagining Appalachia team kind of conceived of this conversation, it was supposed to be a conversation around opportunities for Appalachian communities to take advantage of the Green Bank for Rural America. And then things changed in February and March, and funding freezes started to happen. And so we thought about canceling this conversation, but the team at Reimagine Appalachia really invited us to reimagine what the conversation could be, to reframe it, and to talk really explicitly about how our organizations and our partnerships are changing to meet the moment, and be explicit about how we're pivoting our strategies. So I'm excited today to be moderating a panel with leaders from Coalfield Development Corporation, the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and the Green Bank for Rural America, and really ask about both the foundations of these organizations' work and how they're being impacted in the current landscape, but also what it means to move forward in a time of a lot of uncertainty. So after we hear from our panelists today, we'll open up the floor for a wider conversation. We really hope that today's session can be one of shared learning and collective conversation. So Dana and the team will help walk through some questions and Mentimeter at the end as well. So to start off, I'd love to just have each of our panelists briefly introduce themselves. I'll turn it over to Jacob, Katie, and then Daniel.
Howdy, y'all. Jacob Hanna, CEO of Coalfield Development, based here in Huntington, West Virginia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Loudin. I'm the Director of Strategic Development at the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and I am calling in today from my home in beautiful Buckhannon, West Virginia, right in the middle of the state. Thanks.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here. Daniel Wallace, CEO of the Green Bank for Rural America. I will fess up that I am sitting in Maine right now, which is my home state, but also a very, very rural place with lots of similarities. And it's just really exciting to be here with you all. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks to all of our panelists. So to start off, I'd love to hear more about each of the organizations. I know some of us have been doing work in the Appalachian region for a long time, work to build partnerships and networks. And the Green Bank is newer to the scene and is bringing some fresh energy and ideas to the table. I'd love to just hear about the trajectory of each organization's work over the years and the kinds of partnerships and collaborations that are helping you move your work forward. And we'll start with Jacob.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate you. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Coalfield Development, some of you all may be familiar with us, but we've been around for about 15 years now. We started with one volunteer and two former coal miners trying to fix up a house in Mingo County with a $1,500 loan. And so from those humble beginnings, we've grown to be a pretty sizable partner in not only the southern coal fields of West Virginia, but in central Appalachia as well. And we focus a lot on how we define a triple bottom line approach, which is in the next slide, trying to figure out how we combine people, places, and prosperity together to complement each other, because our region might be preaching to the choir here, is facing a lot of challenges with the decline of the economy in our area. My town of Huntington is the highest opiate overdose rate in America, a lot of joblessness in the region. So how can we empower the people who've sort of been cast aside from those systems to enable them to transform the places that have been left behind from the different sectors to then generate prosperity that should have stayed behind for our communities. And so that leads to the next slide, which is sort of repeating myself at this point, but people, place, and prosperity all complementing each other and leaning into each other to have a virtuous cycle rather than a vicious cycle. And so that looks a lot like workforce development initiatives that we have been championing for since day one for 15 years. They take on many different forms. They can look like a one-day training with us if you're a farmer hoping to learn how to build a hoop house, or it can look like a 3-year-long commitment with us where you're getting your associate's degree while you're working with us and getting paid to be trained in the Carpenters Union and renovating a former factory to be a hub for innovation. And so it ranges to the individual's needs and the community's needs and the employer's needs. And that's our human-based approach. And it leads to tangible outcomes like an old abandoned school building getting renovated, which is what that middle picture is, to become affordable housing, or to have businesses in the downstairs. And that leads to those buildings housing new entities and new enterprises, which is actually the next slide. There's not a silver bullet for the coal impacted communities in our region, but it's more of a silver buckshot. And that's what you're looking at on the screen here. And so it's a lot of different programs and employers in the region. Coalfield can't employ them all. And so how can we help create and incubate other businesses to have multiple options for our trainees to find employment initiatives? And that can include sustainable agriculture and reclamation of former mineland sites and brownfield sites. It can include sustainable light manufacturing. It can include renewable energy strategies, on and on and on. And so all this has led to this cascading momentum of scale and impact and reach across our counties and communities, to where in the previous 4 years we saw an unprecedented amount of funding aimed towards Appalachian communities, but no one really had the capacity to pull it down on their own. And so folks like the ones that you're going to hear from today banded together to pull down funding as a simulated capacity. So Katie and I are both of some of those organizations that have helped to steer some of that conversation to build what is at the bottom of that slide, the Act Now Coalition, which is the Appalachian Community Transformation Coalition. And so together we pulled down about $62 million in Economic Development Administration funding, which also leveraged another 20-something million in non-federal funding as match. And then those funds were distributed throughout our partnerships, throughout our communities, throughout West Virginia, to have that amplifying effect of funding that couldn't have been achieved had any of us tried to go after this on our own with our limited capacity. So it's been really exciting to see all of this momentum grow just beyond one organization. And if you go to my last slide, some of those impacts to date, just from Coalfield's end, this doesn't include the coalition. So if you include the coalition, it's a much broader impacts, but just for Coalfield's perspective, about 350,000 square feet of formerly dilapidated property. Again, those are old school buildings, brownfield sites, mineland sites, reclaimed or revitalized in our 21 county service area. Around 4,000 people trained. These are folks like my dad, who is working in the coal mines, laid off from the sector, looking for new opportunities. It's folks who are exiting recovery, folks who are laid off in the coal industry, folks who have never gotten a driver's license or had it and couldn't get it back. These are folks that we want to focus on to empower and be employed in these new sectors. And all of this has led to the momentum of being able to leverage $450 million into Appalachia. Again, from those humble beginnings, it's about collaboration and scale together. That this work is bigger than just any one of us, and the solutions have to be bigger too. And from that, about 92 different organizations and businesses have been incubated or supported through those sectors. So a lot of exciting momentum, a lot of exciting continued steady growth and productivity in our communities. And so it's been a model that's been tried and true. And you're going to hear a little bit more about how this is evolving or has been impacted from the recent changes that have happened, what has stayed the same, what has changed. But in general, I I like to try and be an advocate as much as possible for nonprofits in a region that we're not just sort of like, kumbaya, sit around a campfire and not do real work. We're very much roll up our sleeves and get the work done kind of organizations. That's a lot of folks in this room right now, and these numbers speak for themselves. And I couldn't have a better segue for that type of organization than passing it off to Katie and the work at the Hub.
Thanks so much, Jacob. I'll try to live up to that introduction. Amazing. Okay, so I will get into it. Again, I'm Katie from the West Virginia Community Development Hub. We'll hit the next slide. So the Hub began in 2009. We're about, almost 16 years old now. I do just want to, start with our mission, which is really the core of who we are. We help communities improve their quality of life by investing in leaders, building partnerships, tackling barriers to place-based community development, and amplifying the stories of the communities where we live and work, right? And so simply put, that is the work that our staff, our partners, our communities in this ecosystem is doing day in and day out. So if you hear me say nothing else today, that is what I hope you take with you. We know that community-driven change is possible, and it's happening today. It's happening every day in West Virginia, and that is really the momentum that we have seen building over time. Next slide for me, please. Okay, so the Hub does this in 4 ways. The first way that I think like a lot of folks are familiar with is the investment that we do on the ground in community teams by working directly with mostly rural, often economically distressed communities across West Virginia and increasingly across Central Appalachia. So, in, 2009 to just up to a few years ago, we were typically working with, up to a couple dozen community members, community teams a year. I'm going to talk about it, but last year we actually worked with 42 communities. And so there's been a huge demand for our work lately. We've just seen this enormous, demand for our resources and communities who want to take advantage of this opportunity to really scale up and grow their communities. So we have community coaches who are walking alongside leaders at the rural level, at the community level, and this is often like 7 to 10 community leaders who are looking around saying, I want to make a difference in my community. There are some great things happening here. What is working and how can we build on that and where can we get started? And so our coach walks alongside those communities in oftentimes like an 18-month to 3-year process, depending on the program. So that's where we start. We also build really impactful partnerships across the community development system, again, to bring in as a resource to those teams, to work in collaboration. Many of these partners, several of you are on this call. So we are really trying to build strong partnerships across the system to really tackle next the barriers that exist, within the community development system. So we're looking at what are the opportunities for rural communities, either at the federal level or, what are the national resources? How can we bring those resources into Appalachia? What are the opportunities for investment into our rural communities? How can we mitigate some of those barriers? So we're taking both a community-centered grassroots approach in our community development work at the ground level, but then we're also saying, what can we do at the systems level to eliminate some of those barriers flowing into our communities? And so we have to take an approach at both levels to make sure that resources flow into our communities. So, and then lastly, we are really trying to drive forward a new story about West Virginia and how positive change is possible and is happening today. And that's really, made possible through our storytelling and our narrative change work that's coming out of our communities. And we're really, hoping and, driving the empowered storytelling that community members can tell the stories themselves, right? Of their stories. Like, we don't need a national narrative about Appalachia or about West Virginia being told about us, right? We can tell our own stories. So those are the ways that we are, building communities in West Virginia. Next slide for me, please. So in 2024 alone, like I said, we actually worked in 42 communities across 7 states directly through our community coaching programs. This was a really big year for us. We were able to send out almost $300,000 in mini grant funding and pre-development technical assistance programs to communities from resident-led for resident-led community development projects, right? So these were like community teams that said, like, this is what we want to do, right? Like, we want to like build a community park. We want to like look at this piece of property. We want to, develop this asset, right? It wasn't like an elected official who necessarily had an agenda. It was like a community volunteer team who said, we want to do this thing. And so we're really proud of the resources that we were able to get into the communities. And from that, our communities were able to leverage almost $12.4 million in outside funding for their projects last year, which is just incredible. And a lot of this, this is a mix of both federal and private resources, philanthropic resources coming into the region for like trail and recreation development, historic renovation, workforce development, right? This is all coming into the region. And then, through all of this, we're engaging over 300 partners in this work. And so, we're doing this with a network of partners. We are certainly not doing this alone. And so we're just really grateful to work in a system where people are willing to come to the table for the communities and for the incredible leaders that we see across West Virginia every day. So, through all of this, through the Act Now Coalition, where we are in 16 communities in Southern West Virginia right now, we have been coaching 7 coal impacted communities in West Virginia and outside West Virginia through the Building Resilient Economies in Coal Communities, the Breck Challenge with the National Association of Counties with NACO. We've really seen an investment in coal impacted communities, in communities who are trying to look for a new economic future, right? And one that isn't dependent necessarily on fossil fuel extraction or like boom and bust cycles, right? They're looking for like more local economic stability. They're looking to create new economic futures. So, we're trying to help them bring multiple partners to the table and engage the local community to build more downtown revitalization, recreational development, small business and entrepreneurial support, and arts and culture development. And we've had success connecting historically disinvested places with funding opportunities, particularly federal funding, to bring their visions to life. When we invest in Appalachia using a community-driven engagement process and trust communities to take control of their own futures, we know that amazing things can happen because we see it every day. So I will stop there and I will pass it to Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much, Jacob. Again, Daniel Wallace, it's really awesome to be here with everybody today to talk about the Green Bank for Rural America. We are the newcomer on the block, but that said, we are organized as inside of Appalachian Community Capital, which is an organization that many of you may be aware of and has been around for well over a decade. We were formed to ensure that rural Americans gain the most benefit from the new energy economy. That's the purpose, and still today, despite some challenges, what we're intending to do. Certainly, as Jacob and Katie have spoken to, we partnership is core to who we are. Bringing in our formation, which, you know, we actually got started in formation mode a couple years ago. We're embedded in community, we're embedded in partnerships. So we started by bringing in voices from across Appalachian communities to hear what folks thought would be valuable to their places. We formed an advisory group, which eventually transitioned into a steering committee. And of course, we engaged amazing people like Jacob and Katie and their organizations in the work to ensure that we were forming something that would be value add for everybody, and particularly for rural communities. So next slide, please. I'm going to rapid fire through a few slides so we can get to further conversation, but we are here to serve rural America, Appalachian communities in particular, coal and energy communities in particular, but frankly also across areas of rural America. So we do have a national scope rooted and grown in Appalachia and focused on folks who have really been impacted by historic disinvestment. Next slide, please. We have 5 pillars to our work. Sometimes I think that's too much, but all of these are absolutely critical to building the ecosystem for success for some of the projects that we're trying to support. So we do ideally come to the table with capital to support through community lenders, investment in community. We bring in and rely upon and build on community engagement and workforce development. I want to really emphasize how core both of those pillars are to us, but I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it because we've got Katie and Jacob here. But these aspects of the work are absolutely critical for moving forward. We also support technical assistance. This is kind of business development support, entrepreneurial support, project developer support. And then really critically, and actually Katie made some comments to this effect, narrative change, lifting up stories from communities, from individuals and communities, from community lenders, in their words, talking about their activity and their vision for the future of rural America. We really believe that these 5 pillars together support a transformative approach. Next slide, please. I may have touched on this already, but we certainly come with these 3 core beliefs, that real solutions don't serve communities, they emerge from within them. That's really, really important for longevity, for durability, for building healthier communities and creating jobs that are sticky, that stay. Community engagement, workforce development are essential. I come from a background in something called community development financial institutions. CDFIs are really amazing organizations, and some have tried to bring in the community engagement and workforce development. And I've certainly seen personally in my work and in my time when that happens, it just unlocks really amazing outcomes for those communities. So it's a critical part of what we do. And finally, stories, and we're seeing this in different ways now. Stories really do shape what we believe is possible. And I believe everything is possible in rural America. I believe that with leadership from community level, with resources and support, rural America has this just amazing future. But there's a lot to overcome. There are a lot of challenges to meet in order to get there. Next slide, please. So this actually speaks, so this slide, and I'll of course be talking about this a little bit, but our initial funding came through the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and these were the initial projected impacts and what we still hope to achieve in time. GGRF is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. You'll see that acronym under the first circle. But this is what we were originally coming to the table with in terms of investment and technical assistance and community engagement capital, split into the $400 million for deployment plus the TA. However, that impact is meant to be leveraged 3 times. So what we're really looking to achieve overall from an investment perspective is $1.6 billion in our initial work. Next slide, please. I'm actually going to skip this one to move us along, but there's some good stuff there. So I think the slide deck will be available to folks. The facts. Next slide, please. So obviously, elephant in the room. At this point, we are not able to. The Green Bank for Rural America is not able to access its funding and move projects along. So we'll talk about this in different ways going forward, but it does mean that because our funding is frozen right now, I have to give a little bit of a disclaimer, a little bit of a caveat, which is just that there are certain questions that you might have that I might not be able to answer. But we'll see what people are curious about. And if I can't answer, I'm just going to be really straight with you and say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. And we'll proceed from there. So thanks for the opportunity for an introduction. Back to Emma.
Thanks, Daniel. So to jump into the conversation about impacts, I know that everyone here is aware this has been, to put it lightly, a time of great change for organizations, especially those that leverage federal funding. So I'd love for each of our panelists to talk about the impacts they're seeing on the ground in their organizations, and as well as the opportunity costs that are arising from this shifting landscape that we're all in. So Jacob, we'll turn it to you.
Sure. I'm preaching to the choir at this point, but to sort of translate what you're seeing on your screen right now with this slide is just sort of a general back of the napkin calculation of the different funding sources and projects that at least our organization is involved in some way through some workforce development assistance or construction or community revitalization efforts. And so, a couple of things to pull out from this would be, for the one that says OSED, that's a lot of solar panels on top of former coal mine sites that are no longer producing coal. And so it's turning those former mine sites into something useful again and creating a lot of jobs. And so it's unfortunately paused, and some of them have been terminated. And other projects like in the EDA bucket are very prominent downtown buildings that have been dilapidated, empty, or brownfield sites that we have actively trained people to be prepared to do construction in. We've trained folks to be prepared to install solar. And so folks are trained and waiting to revitalize their communities, and they can't. And so that's been really, really challenging. And that's the part that's really difficult for me to digest, because what we do is for communities. If it's not for communities, we're not interested. And so to have all of this so close to the starting line, and folks just sort of still holding their breath and not quite sure which direction to take is really devastating, not only on the infrastructure of our communities, but it's devastating on the trust that they have that these projects are ever going to happen. I think there's been a lot of empty promises made to Appalachians, and we don't want to be the bearers of those empty promises. We've spent, you've heard from everyone here, over a decade for each of us building that trust and relationship and functionality, and now that's being hollowed out. And so, we're going to see less folks get off of unemployment to come get a job because there's, uncertainty. We're going to see less folks say, yeah, I want to get trained, or I want to get my driver's license back, because there's uncertainty. And so folks feel less confident to step into programs like ours because of the uncertainty of all the funding in the landscape. So it's just really challenging. Many impactful projects that would be well underway right now, hiring hundreds of people, creating multiple opportunities for economic development and employer development, that have all been paused. And all of our organizations like ourselves, you bake in your overhead into those grants too, assuming that you'll be able to use that for your general operating funds. And so we're all feeling a hit as well for just our cash flow and challenges there. So it's been really devastating. And I know it's a through line for our other organizations, but I'll pass it to Katie to talk a bit more about what that looks like on their end.
Yeah, so, our communities have really taken advantage of those pre-development technical assistance funds that I talked about in our 2024 impacts, right? They have designs, renderings, reports, and plans now with less viable options now to move those forward in the current environment. Our communities need, access to slow patient capital and, options for mixed capital, varied capital. If anyone's been to Petersburg, West Virginia and has, been to the beautiful Hermitage Inn, a project like that in the current environment would be like really difficult to do. So, these kinds of projects in rural places, it takes an all hands on deck kind of approach. And so it's just going to be harder to do this kind of work. Just honestly, our federal grants are just being impacted by the communication, the pauses. Fewer staff are available to answer questions, and the work is just slower, and that's sort of impacting our ability to move nimbly and be responsive to our communities. So again, it's just impacting our trust and those relationships that we have with our communities. And I hate that, but I think that our communities know that like we're being as transparent as possible and that we're in it with them. Probably everyone has seen like the national news lately, and one area that I'm really concerned about, and we're very devastated about, is the impacts to the AmeriCorps program, which has a huge footprint in rural communities, and we've seen what those cuts have been like in West Virginia. Over the past few days with, 200 AmeriCorps members losing their spots, particularly in West Virginia, but I know this is a national challenge as well. And I will just be the first person to say that a well-placed AmeriCorps member could be the difference in a community between a plan sitting on a shelf and a plan getting legs and actually turning into a project. And so that one's been really challenging, and it's one that we're hoping, could be revisited. And, we are, hoping that we can find a way to support those AmeriCorps members and keep them in the state or keep them active within their communities. And I know there are a lot of folks thinking about how to support those AmeriCorps members. And just thinking again about this momentum, we will have 16 communities in the Act Now Coalition with economic resilience plans ready to go, right? They will be ready for investment. They will be ready for movement. And I am just worried that there will be no place for them to go, right? Like I'm worried that that there will be no vehicle to take those plans into action. And so we are going to be in a place of increased competition for very limited federal, state, and private philanthropic dollars on a playing field that we already know has equity challenges. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Daniel.
Yeah, so the Green Bank, that 5-pillar structure that I just described, was really meant to be a systems level strategy for rural transformation, bringing all those components together, building on the extraordinary activity already underway, really trying to drive far-reaching economic growth and benefit by creating good jobs, building wealth for small businesses, and really making entire communities healthier, rethinking what's possible for rural America. With that in mind, I should also just say, and to really accelerate the work that was already going on through networks like the Central Appalachian Network CAN and the Appalachian Funders Network and others that already were in existence. So we formally launched first in October and then again in December, first for Hurricane Helene relief, which I'll touch on in a second, and then nationally in December. And we were moving along. It was very exciting to be up and running. And we had a goal to put $100 million out to community lenders by March 31st, and I believe we would have made it. In early February, we learned that the administration was going to focus some attention on GGRF. But interestingly, it came through social media channels. So it really speaks to information flowing through non-traditional methods, and then ultimately our funds were frozen in mid-February. By that time, we had $63 million teed up to 5 Appalachian states to support Hurricane Helene relief. All of that funding is now on pause, and that's just a devastating opportunity cost. With the leverage that would have come in for that, you know, we're talking about almost $250 million flowing to those areas of Appalachia. It's just devastating. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get the words out. It's just really challenging and devastating that kind of support and resources are not getting to the communities and the people and places that need them. And maybe to underline a point that's, I think Jacob and Katie have made very, very clear, the community infrastructure was in motion. Like things were teed up, things were moving, and plans were coming together, and people were thinking about their places in different ways. And these incredible partners like the West Virginia Hub and Coalfield Development were really leading this extraordinary work to support the infrastructure to realize that transformation. So it's a tough moment. Green Bank is here though for the long haul. We are staying the course despite the setbacks. The pathway very likely looks different, but it is our clear purpose and core belief that there are projects to be financed, that there are people to be supported, that there's activity ready to go, and that this sort of comprehensive approach, including community engagement, workforce development, is the way to do it. So Green Bank is not only about the funding that's currently on pause. We are thinking about how we come together, how we find capital, how we support folks in different ways, because we need to try to meet the moment. We need to try to meet the opportunities that are out there and try to just do what we can to enable folks to take those next steps. Again, the long haul. I mean, rural America knows the long haul, and we're in it.
And Daniel, I'd love to stay with you for the last question, which is really about what are each of you doing to navigate these changes, navigating the pivots that our organizations are having to make in this moment, and what do you hope people can take away from this, from your experience and this conversation?
That is a big, big question. And I'm really curious to hear Jacob and Katie's answers as well. You know, the funding freezes and these dire risks for our communities feels like the new normal. And that's taking some adjustment. That's taking, like, it's come in some ways so fast that we still aren't recognizing how we might need to adapt and change and think about how to move forward in a different way. But this isn't the time to go quiet. This isn't the time to sit back. This is the time to embrace the challenge. It's the time to move together, to lead with courage, and really to step up and tell our stories louder than ever. So I'm going to go through a few things really quickly, but some of these are the lessons that we've learned. recognize the signals early. These changes are probably what we can expect for a while. So we can't explain them away. We really have to see the patterns and build new ways to act. I don't know what all those new ways are, but we need to be prepared for that kind of critical thinking and reconfiguration. We need to be prepared, but not go silent. Really have our backup plans, our scenario planning in order. Make sure we know our rights and our foundation. Just make sure we know where we stand. Our communities need us to be clear and visible, especially right now when things get hard. I really think that moving together, not alone, solidarity is a survival strategy, is really what that boils down to. Sharing information, aligning how we show up, offering backup when other folks are under pressure. When we move together, it sends a signal, and it's more powerful, and it really doesn't get lost in the static. Leading with courage. So I've talked a lot about Green Bank, but it's not about Green Bank. It's about our communities and the people in our communities and the folks who have made their lives, who live and work in a place and want to see that place continue for their children and their grandchildren. So an organization like Green Bank, I feel it's really important for us to keep our programs alive, keep standing up for what matters, and being willing to go first, or stepping into it, leaning into it, even when the path isn't totally clear.
Thanks, Daniel.
And last, I would say, because I do want to turn it over, just owning and protecting our story. A lot of stories are being told right now. And many of them are pervasive and not true. So we really need to be the ones telling our stories, talking about our impacts, talking about our communities. Our stories are not just sort of proof that something that's happening. It's also sort of protection of who we are and vision for who we want to be. So really leaning into our stories. I hope I didn't go on too long there. Thank you.
Let's pull in Katie and then Jacob before we open it up for audience Q&A. How are we navigating, and what lessons do you want to take away, Katie?
Yeah, I think that we can be creative about our resources and our scale, right? If we don't have $500 million, we could look at a region and say, what can we do in 5 communities, right? We don't need $500 million to impact work in just a few places, right? What else can we do? We can engage our network, right? We're already doing that. We're doing that on this call, right? We may not have all the answers, but we know that we're stronger when we're sharing with our partners and working together. Right now is not the time to be siloed. We have to name the questions and the puzzles that we're facing. That can be really useful. We shouldn't let, just because we don't have all the answers, be a barrier to reaching out and engaging others in that struggle. We have to be real about how we're being impacted, right? Have you reached out to your funders to share about how you're being impacted? Or are you sort of putting on a brave face and acting like everything is okay, right? And like Daniel said, are you scenario planning based on, those funding resources and the revenue that you have, right? This is just a time to be really honest about how things are in your organization and how you're being impacted. And then last but not least, this is like a little bit of Appalachian realness here, but Appalachians are self-determining, all right? We are innovative and we are creative. We have been underestimated a lot and left out a lot, and we've had a lot of broken promises, right? We can often take something out of nothing, right? I will remind everyone of the $1,500 that Coalfield started out with, right? And that work is represented on this call by the community that has been cultivated by Reimagine Appalachia, right? We can form networks, we can support each other, we can co-create together, right? We've been here before and we can do it again. It would be great if we had more resources to support us. It would make the work a heck of a lot easier, but we are self-determining, and if we have to go it alone with each other, supporting us, we will. So I will stop there, but that's my hoorah for Appalachia.
Thanks, Katie. I'll aim in everything that has been said before me. A couple of things I'll just add rapid fire. Identify the through lines. And what I mean by that is there's going to be things that are priorities on both sides of the aisle, no matter what. Some of those things are going to be workforce. Rural is still going to be relevant. Economic development is still going to be relevant. And those are general enough terms that can encompass a lot of what we do in general. And so lean into those through lines, lean into them, and let them be the vessel that carries forward the rest of your work. Lead with that. Speed is your best ally. If you stop, you're dead, just to be blunt. So if you keep momentum and you keep moving forward, even if the momentum is an inch where you were hoping for a mile, that's success. If you stop, full stop, then the whole thing stops with it. So speed is your ally. Choose your language strategically. I'm not saying code switch and try and, be double tongued for every person you meet, but choose your language strategically. For someone who grew up with 3 generations of coal miners in Mingo County, West Virginia, I never used the term clean energy, because what a coal miner would tell me is like, well, don't they mine lithium to make the batteries and the panels? And isn't that, better? Well, you're right. There's always an environmental impact. So I'll call it advanced energy. I'll call it renewable energy. So just there's ways to sort of avoid unnecessary battles. And that comes with choosing your language strategically and being wise about what words you use. And then when you have those right words, use them. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I think folks are going to wait until they hear that there's a fire. Otherwise, folks aren't going to step in. And we've seen that. We've not seen the response that we hope we would have seen during COVID, where there was sort of this outpouring of support. And so no one's going to know what the need is if you don't say what it is. So really echoing a lot of what Katie said on that last point. And then talk with your representatives. We've had a lot of great support from our representatives. We may not see eye to eye on everything, but everyone agrees with that first point that I made. Jobs are important. Workforce is important. Rural is important. Economic development is important. So if we can find common ground, we can get advocacy. And we've gotten a lot of that from our representatives. And then last thing I'll say is a no-brainer, but diversify your funding, folks. It's great that we build up the scale to pull this down federally, but don't rest on it. And I would say inversely, if you built up your scale to pull down funds philanthropically, don't rest on it. Diversify your funds. Have a third federal, a third philanthropic, a third earned revenue as much as possible. And I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Jacob. And I'll turn it over now to Emma Pepper to help facilitate some questions. And Dana's going to share her screen to bring everybody into the conversation.
Hey folks, I'm Emma Pepper. I'm the Acting Communications Director at the Green Bank for Rural America. It's so nice to be here with you today. We have just about 5 minutes left together, and we wanted to take some time to invite in conversation from the group. If you could go ahead and pull your phones out or on your computer, open up minty.com. This is at the top of the shared screen here, minty.com, and use code, and Dana just dropped it into the chat as well. Thank you so much, Dana. Use code 66239046. And we want to hear from you on this first question, which is, what is one message that you would send to funders, policymakers, and or national partners in this time? We've just heard stories from 3 groups, and we'd like to hear input on your stories and your feedback as well. We already have responses coming in. I'm appreciating the person who said help. Yes, we heard from one of our speakers that we need to be open and honest right now about what's going on in our organizations, in our communities, and so put out the cry for help. Let's see, please step up and support the work in Appalachia. We don't need a big federal gap filled, but something needs to be filled. The foundations of democracy are in rural Appalachian communities. Please don't make us have another revolution. There are a lot of folks who are approaching this time in different ways. We want to use the norms and processes that are set up through our democratic institutions, right? I see someone calling out Main Streets need help. Absolutely. As Katie mentioned, the hub worked in 42 communities in the past year. There are main streets all across West Virginia and all across the region where community teams are ready to make change, and they need help now. Let's see. Congress needs to stand up to the dictator and stop the madness. We need to be bold in our language, okay? We need to be bold. And it's okay to call a spade a spade. We want good jobs in Appalachia that sustain families and the land. Okay, that is our diplomatic language there. We want all of those things. We can agree on these dreams together. I'd like to hear from some of our panelists. Are there any of these that are resonating with y'all that you want to lift up and speak to?
I just want to say all of the above, and also that, especially funders, I think it's that we've all seen that especially private philanthropy is not going to be able to fill the gaps that the federal government is leaving, like something like 282%. Like private philanthropy would have to increase their giving by 282% to fill in the gap, right? That's not going to happen. So I think that we need to be strategic. I think that we have to, work together. And, I think that we've seen great leadership in philanthropy. And I think this is a time for the power dynamics and the walls to come down a little bit between practitioners and philanthropy so that we can be really honest about addressing the critical needs in our country and in Appalachia right now.
Thank you so much, Katie. Daniel, Jacob, are there any final comments that you want to leave us with? It could be in response to these comments or otherwise.
I'll just say very, very quickly, these comments are amazing to have captured here. They're in an interesting way, they're inspirational, to kind of inspiring us all to get active and get to it and be bold and be courageous. The only small item I would add is that the scale, and I think everybody knows this, but the scale of impact is so huge. The most recent public report out of the Washington Post, of all places, indicated that EPA is planning to cancel 781 grants. The work that I do is only one piece of that. I mean, it's just a massive amount of activity. So we all have to come together. We all have to lift up the stories, and we all have to get innovative and creative, as Katie mentioned, about how we move forward. But we can do it. We will do it. We just have to lean in and just get strong and move forward.
I agree with all that. Now, the last thing I'll add is just no one cares about these things until it becomes real. And a lot of the words I see in here is what helps make that real. I see Main Street, I see housing, I see jobs, all these words that are popping out. That's how this translates into something real and not just this esoteric political noise. These are real communities, real people, real downtown neighborhoods that are hurting because of this, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so the more that we can lean into that, it's hard to argue against those things. Those are very American things that we value.
Thank you, Jacob. I see Natalia dropped a couple of events into the chat upcoming for Reimagine Appalachia, and I want to pass it back to Dana just for any final closing comments. And thank you so much to Dana and the whole Reimagine Appalachia team for inviting us into this space.
We couldn't be more grateful that you all were able to join us as well for your just decades of great work and the work that we know is going to happen in the future. I want to echo Katie's notes. You know, we've done this before. Folks are gritty. They're ready to do the work, and we know the work that needs done. And I wish that it was easier, but we know how to do hard things. So I think I'll leave it at that. But, you know, yes, Reimagine has a lot of events coming up. I might put a particular highlight on, we have a manufacturing mapping event, a manufacturing assets in the region next week that I'm incredibly excited about. And then on a pragmatic basis, if you were compelled by Jacob's comments and other comments to contact your members of Congress, and you're not sure how to do that as a nonprofit entity, we do have webinars coming up in June that will give you information about just the nuts and bolts of, you know, getting more politically engaged and doing just basic education to your members of Congress. I have a few more minutes to stick around if anybody has any concrete questions about what's next or what's happening. Again, I'm so grateful for everyone's time and for all of the just ongoing work you do to make and keep Appalachia as the place we love. So thank you all. And I'm going to remove my spotlight. All right. Great. Sorry. Can we stop recording? Any last questions as we wrap up? I just have another minute. I know we're over time. So yeah.